And what I'm willing to actually do is to stand up in the federal parliament and just call them out. Call them out. Be a disruptor. Put these things on the table. Put it on the table. Hey guys. Yeah, thanks for being here. I just want to say, Maria, thanks for organising this. It's fantastic, you know what I mean? We're a grassroots movement. That's just how it is. We really are a grassroots movement. And, I've been at the polling station, the pre-polling station, because it's delightful of the status quo to make sure that we have to be at a pre-polling station from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night for 2 weeks in a row before we actually get to the federal election. And we know who that makes it really hard for. It makes it hard for independents and any minor parties that might want to make a change. And then to top it all off, I don't know if anyone's seen my How to Vote card. Steve, you got one of my How to Vote cards on you? I have one somewhere. I think I left it in my... Oh, thanks, Kylie, thanks. So to top it all off, we're allowed to be on the ballot. But of course, if we want to be an independent, we have to be below the line, tucked away, right at the back. And you can see a little name down the bottom there, Damien Richardson. Good luck voting for that guy. And so there's, if you pair up with someone, you can be above the line. And it's already so complex, I can see everyone else is already like, their eyes are closing because it's already too confusing, because it is too confusing. But anyway, so I run with this guy called John McBride, just so I can go above the line, and I can be above the line with a blank box. I kid you not. Have a look at your ballot paper when you get it, and honestly, trust it. When I say put 1 in the column B, which is the second column, which that's a small miracle. We drew well. In the first ballot, the ballot that tells you where you're going to be on the ballot, you put the 1 in column B, and that means you'd be voting for me. But there's nothing else to signify that other than me telling you this right here and now, to trust me. And I would be dubious about putting a number in that box. And maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but because it's just floating there in outer space. And there's a big line to separate my name and John McBride's name below the line. And you've got to work out, that's corresponding with that. It's just so insane. And it's, again, the system's been gamed and weaponised for the major parties. What do? And we're there on the hustings today, and you say it to the major parties, and they sort of look down. Because they know it's the truth. They know it's the truth, and it's a perversity. But it's a perversity of democracy, and it's a perversity we've been living in for a long period of time, and it's a perversity that we've all put up with. So the onus is on us to want to make a change, to want to make a difference, and that's what I can see. And I keep going, and I was in the West at a place called Delahaye last night. I'd never been there before. I didn't even know Delahaye existed, to be honest. And we're in a person's home. They opened up their home to us, and there was about 35 people came and packed out this lounge room in Delahaye, and we had just the greatest conversation between us all. It was just fantastic. It was magnificent, you know what I mean? And I got a bit emotional at one point because I'm getting tired, because I'm on the hustings the whole time and constantly talking, and then, doing how to vote cards and giving people how to vote cards. And a woman grabbed my how to vote card today, and she looked me in the eye and she said, I'll be putting you last. So, at least I'm having an effect. From the highs of the night before, So you keep getting, a leveler, you know what I mean? I looked at her and I thought, is it my ex or something like that? You know what I mean? And she was a little bit too old. I can say that because sometimes I forget that I'm getting older too. Maybe she was actually the right age. But look, we're at this place in Delahaye, and there was just people gathered like a community, because they wanted to be there. Because after the highs that we had late last year, when there was over 500,000 or roughly 500,000 of us, 4 weekends in a row. Remember that? Like Janelle, you were there. And lots of people that in this room I met in the protest movement. And those people have actually become my friends. Would it be as bold to say they've actually become my family as well? Because you have, in a really strange sort of way. And that's what it was like last night in this house. I wasn't alive during the Soviet times, but it felt to me something like, and I know there's so many East Europeans here that will nod and agree, and people that grew up under Tito's Yugoslavia, and the insanity. And so you'd have to be you'd have to be communing with people that you could trust. And that's where we were last night, in a room where we could trust people. And people spoke really openly and frankly, and this one guy who was really vehement, and he got up and he spoke so well. I was a little bit pissed off because he spoke better than me, But it was good too, it was, go mate, go, because I'm sick of hearing my own voice in some respects. It was good to hear someone else in the community. And then he talked about he said, where are the men? Where are the men to stand up to this tyranny? Where are the males? And it's a pertinent question, because masculinity has been undermined for the last 50 years. It's just been undermined, and we've all gone along with it to some extent. We've all gone along with it to save face. I've gone along with it to save face. I went along with it to earn a check on television. And I would see it all the time. I'd see it in the cultural Marxist scripts I was reading all the time. I was waiting for that moment where my character would be more of an idiot than the biggest idiot that was actually already in the script. Do you know what I mean? And it was always there, and I knew it. And if you say it to people, they just don't want to hear it. People didn't want to know about it. You know what I mean? So eventually you learn to pull your head back in, because it's too frightening to stay out. And you feel like you're going to lose everything too, because that's the threat. That's the threat they use today. You know what I mean? We're not in gulags, but they put you in a different gulag. And the gulag is the threat of taking away your ability to make ends meet and earn a living. And I think that's what we've all been confronted with COVID, because we've seen so much complicity from institutions and people I would have never thought that would have given complicity. And I keep hearing people saying they've got injuries, and there was a woman there last night too, and she was injured. And her doctor just refused to accept it. And she was a really intelligent, articulate, smart, sophisticated woman. Do you know what I mean? And it didn't matter what she said. And then she started crying. And of course she started crying because the frustration, the tears of frustrations that the institutions have been subverted. The institutions have been subverted. And if you start to do some research, and I haven't done enough of it, you find the Frankfurt School at the heart of it. Because what happened was, financial Marxism didn't work for them. It didn't work with the communism and the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia and Romania and all the Eastern Bloc and Vietnam, etc. It didn't work as a physical means of controlling the money. So they came up with an idea of cultural Marxism instead, Guys like Gramsci and Michel Foucault, all these guys, all these basically homosexual men really discontent with a culture they felt had rejected them anyway. Then they found a way of criticising the culture through cultural Marxism. And so it just becomes critical theory. So all you've got is criticism. And that is a surefire way of actually undermining all your institutions and ultimately your nation state. And our nation state has been undermined. So finally, when you get to COVID and they say you're not allowed to go 5 kilometres beyond your home, even though there's all these anomalies where people in accepted industries are exceptions to the rule and they're allowed to, but you're not allowed to question it. Because if you question it, you're an anti-vaxxer, and that's as bad as homophobe or a racist or a sexist or whatever else we've been called previously. And what happens? No one stands up. But ultimately, people did stand up, but what happened? I'm still trying to work it out. Can anyone explain it to me? How there was that many people amassed on the steps of Parliament, and we finally met in Flagstaff Gardens. I remember when we all came up, and I kept looking at this sea of people kept coming into Flagstaff, and I'm thinking Flagstaff Gardens isn't big enough. Like, that place is huge, man, and they just came flooding in. Couldn't hear the speakers, had a good sound system that day, couldn't hear the speakers, pointless, waste of time, because there was just so many people. And if that wasn't enough, the next weekend, the same thing. I mean, really extraordinary. And then the third weekend again, and the fourth weekend again. And then I think there was a hiatus, and I think Andrews must have been really grateful that we all pissed off to Canberra. Like, we gave him a real break. We gave him a real break that day, you know what I mean? And again, the same thing in Canberra, like Australians from everywhere, and in that Epic, Camp Epic. Look, I'm not a hippie. I'm really not. I don't have a lot of the ideas that a lot of the people have that were staying in camp. I was glad I didn't stay in Camp Epic. I stayed at someone else's house on their couch because I didn't necessarily want to sleep there. But boy, the energy there was extraordinary. It was amazing. It was undeniable. It was like the cricket, 1983.
And it was good. It was a good feeling. And there was a volatility that was at the 11th. I think we met on the 12th of February. Yeah, it was the 11th. And there was a volatility in the air that was like, this thing could spill. This thing could go anywhere. Because there's just that many people. The state must have been really concerned. And then it turns out they were really concerned, because when we got to the top of Capitol Hill, they had those LRAD machines, right? What are they? And I've throughout this stuff, I've found out about all this weaponry the state has acquired for itself. And it didn't acquire it for itself in 2020 when they declared a pandemic. They had acquired those, what was the other ones? Bearcats. You know those Bearcats? Those urban tanks, basically. There's an urban tank, mate, in Melbourne, and it's been operating and it's been shooting at you guys. And that's okay. That's okay. People don't know about that, but they know someone pissed on the shrine.
A horse.
Well, of course it was a horse. Of course it was a horse. But that's the propaganda cycle. That's where we're at. No, that's the propaganda. That's how rich it is and how strong it is and how deep it is. It's just out in plain sight now. Before, they had a pretense. There was a pretense of not being propaganda, of being sort of somewhere even. And now it's just out in the open. So who's running it? Who's running the show? Is it BlackRock and Vanguard? I was talking to this woman who's vaccine injured last night. She works in finance. She worked for NAB for 17 years and now she works for the Commonwealth Bank. And she's telling me about acquisitions that are being made. Acquisitions that have been made and how small business people have been run out of business and how big organisations too are buying up ideas to rebadge them and make them their own and destroying small business. She's saying this to me. Who am I to say to her that she's wrong with that amount of experience, that level of experience? And this is what's happened now. Since I found out I couldn't go 5 kilometres beyond my home and everyone took it seriously, I realised that there's things in play and things happening that we know not of, that I do not have a complete and comprehensive understanding of. And I'm really willing to stay open as a means, as a conduit to keep learning about different things. And people keep coming up to me and telling me different things. And I'm an individual, there's only so much I can take on. But basically the point for me became, what do I do now? Like, I went to Canberra, the Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police, under heavy, serious questioning, I would have thought, in the Senate, Estimates Committee, said there could have been between 7,000, maybe 10,000 people. That's still a lot of people, and that sort of blank, sort of bureaucratic speak, So what do we do about the bureaucrats? They're the problem. The bureaucrats really a problem. I think the bureaucrats are more of a problem than the politicians in many respects. The politicians are just bureaucrats as well, and maybe they've got a temporary lifespan, And so what do we do about them? What do we do? Do we index their wages according to whatever the average wage of an Australian is? And so if the average wage of the Australian goes down, your wage goes down too, my friend. I mean, we have to be brutal with them. And see, the problem for us is we're operating under an old morality because there's no rule of law anymore, guys. Face it. Look, all these people keep talking to me and there's no rule of law. There's nothing coming to protect them. Everyone's appealed everywhere. Nothing happens. So what do we do? Oh, well, you wouldn't want to do that to them. And there might be bureaucrats in this room listening to me now going, well, what? You tell me. You tell me a better idea. So what do we do as a result? Because we can't operate under an old morality because they're not. And they're just making the benchmark higher and higher for us to sort of have to jump more and more hoops that are impossible, hoops that I'm not willing to jump anymore. I'm just not willing to jump them. And what I'm willing to actually do is, what I would hope is I get enough votes to be elected come the 21st of May and stand up in the federal parliament and just call them out. Call them out. Put these things on the table. Put it on the table. Well, what if we defund the family court? Who says that? No one. Well, I'll say it. Then why don't we defund it and find a better idea, a better way to go, because it's so corrupt. It's evil and it's sinister and it's corrupt. And let's call it out. Why? Why not? And what are the bureaucrats involved in? And all the lawyers all back, climbing over each other, get a little piece of the pie. Absolutely no. All it is critical theory. Again, critical theory upon critical theory. It doesn't build anything. It doesn't do anything. What's happened to our ability? What's happened to our manufacturing base? We don't even have one. We don't have one. We're incapable of having one because we're demoralised as a people. How can we even think we deserve to have one? Better just to sell it. All we sell now is nationhood. We sell our identity, our citizenship. And then we build suburbs in homage to it. And we keep people employed that way. And no one can stand up and do anything. Who's going to stand up and make a case for, a reduction in the standard of living? Because if we want a base in the short term, I cannot see another way around it, but there would have to be a reduction in the standard of living. Now, Scott Morrison's not going to make that argument. Albo's not going to get in and make that argument either. He's going to make sure there's a reduction in the standard of living with his policies, but he's not going to actually make that argument. But again, I don't care. I'll be a senator and I'm happy to make that argument. I can't enforce it. I can't be a silver bullet. But imagine if there's a conversation around it. Imagine if there's a conversation around it, because we're starved of any conversation. I'm sorry, Melbourne and Victoria is probably the most woke state in the country. And remember, we used to think, well, I used to think the rednecks in Queensland. You know what I mean? But they gave us George Christensen and Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Roberts. People that I take real heart from today. So I've had to eat humble pie. I've had to face some humility there and go, well, hang on a minute. And this has happened for some years. This wasn't just recent. It wasn't just on COVID. Because they were talking a truth so unpalatable to the media that the media just does a spin and does a hatchet job on them before you even know it's happening. You don't even know it's happening, and you think you do, but you actually don't. So there's quite a few. There's 7 parliamentarians out of 227 federally that are somewhere out against the narrative. And I draw a real heart from that, and I know all the people I talk to, even those common law people who say don't vote, devolve from the system because the system's so corrupt, still say, did you hear Alex Antich the other day? He was fantastic in question time. God, he was right on. And I interviewed Alex Antich, and we went to places, cultural Marxism, feminism, stuff like that. I thought no politician would touch. And he just went, he said, we're going there, are we? I said, yeah, well, if I can. I'm just interviewing you. And he did. And Malcolm Roberts was the same. He just talked really broadly, and talked about climate change and what a boondoggle that is, how climate change is ultimately a means for the UN to have a tax base, So put a price on carbon, and some of that will go to the United Nations, and then they can come and oppress us with whatever they're going now. And now they're talking about some convention that's happening in Geneva just after our election, and I don't know if this is true or not, where the WHO will become responsible for pandemic response. Yeah, now maybe that's fear-mongering. Maybe it's even someone on our side doing it, because you can't, you know what I mean? And it could be. But what I have to say is it would not surprise me if that were to happen. And what would I say if I was just resting on my hands because I didn't respond to it? Because it moving so fast, it's impossible to respond to. So we're always caught in a rearguard action. We're always reactionary. And they've always got to wherever you go, okay, well, we're going to have a policy later on, our final policy, protect the kids, protect our kids from cultural Marxism, ultimately, because everyone's worried about pedophilia, this boogeyman pedophilia, but what they'll do is they change the name anyway. Well, I'm more worried about how they change and manipulate language. And my kids have already told me, pedophilia, no, Dad, they call it MAP now. My kids have told me this, minor attracted person. So you can normalise it. You begin to, and that's what cultural Marxism does. It attacks the language and the institutions, and it normalises it first, and then it becomes impossible for us to attack someone on that basis because it's immoral. It seems to be an immoral position. But again, we're operating under an old morality, and they're changing the laws on us. They're changing the laws and manipulating us. We're being absolutely and utterly manipulated. We can't be manipulated anymore. So we're going to have to take some hits. And I took a hit today when that woman, for whatever reason, looked me in the eye and said, I will be putting you last. Did she hear one of my speeches or something? You know what I mean? And think, oh my God, that's disgusting. I'm coming for a gay son or something like that. Because that's what people will do. That's what people do, because they weaponise it. They weaponise identity politics. They weaponise it for political advantage, and they don't care about it at all. And I spoke on Saturday night. It was a really great night. A lot of people there, and but I spoke specifically about our original sin, and our original sin is settlement in 1788, on January 26, 1788. That's what they weaponised against us. They found a weakness, because no one necessarily likes to see how Indigenous people are living in communities. It's horrifying. It's horrifying to your sensibilities, and of course it's horrifying to your sensibilities, so they weaponise it. But they don't do anything about it. They just pay fealty through cultural Marxist ceremonies like welcome to country, or for non-Indigenous people, acknowledgement of country. And as I said on Saturday night, and it's worth saying it again, I've got a friend who, I'm right, thanks Susie, I've got a friend who's travelling around with me now, a veteran from the Balkans War. He's seen where it can go when cultures can no longer actually openly communicate, where there's no means left for open communication. And his parents live in the Katherine, and they've got 4 Indigenous children in their care, foster care. They've had them in their care for 7 years. Now the parents had taken 2 jabs and they were due for a booster. The kids, for some reason, because there's all these inconsistencies as per usual, driving us insane, the kids had only had 1 jab. But the authorities, Department of Human Services, were really concerned that the parents needed to take their booster. The parents said, no, we're done, as so many people are. That's enough. They said, okay, get the kids ready, we're coming to take them. 20 minutes it took the Department of Human Services to get there and take those children. Where are those children now? What life are they living now? Does anyone care? Are those building department? Where do children go when they're taken by the Department of Human Services? To some nirvana? Some better place that the department has? No, it's just out of mind, out of sight. No one thinks about that next. Because if that place exists, why weren't they already there in the first place?
That's right.
Yeah, because it's a lie. It's a lie, and again, because it attacks our morality and attacks who we are as people. And who wants to be seen as the white person standing up and saying these things? No one does. You see it every time on TV. You see someone come to that fork in the road, and they go, "Oh no, I'm not going down there." And that's how it works. It's brilliant. It's perfect. God, they're good. Whoever this is, and I hate being a conspiracist. A moderate conspiracist if I can be, you know what I mean? Like, how do we fight back against these things? We fight back, I imagine part of the fight back would be with parliamentary privilege. Parliamentary privilege, to be able to say these things. You can say these things with impunity in the federal parliament, and I know not everyone necessarily likes Nigel Farage, but I saw him when he came out here, and I think that man's extraordinary.
I did too.
What an extraordinary man, yeah. And how's when the 2 lefties were there, and then they sort of chained themselves to the chairs and they set off alarms right in the middle of his speech. So we had to listen to it because they love free speech. And we were all adults capable of paying money for a ticket to go and see this guy speak. But the thing about that guy is he took on the EU. Now, how powerful must the EU have seemed as an institution to British people at that particular point in time? And this guy said no, and he was not a politician. He came outside, he was a businessman, a small businessman, came outside and said this is his life's purpose. He's going to get them out. He got elected. He never got elected to any seats inside Britain itself, but he got elected to the EU. And he makes his maiden speech, I'm getting us out of here. So he's going to fall on his sword. And this is the thing a career politician would never do. I'm going to stay in here no matter what, and I'll tolerate anything to get along with the group, so I can stay here and continue to have a career even after my parliamentary term's up. Who knows where I'll be, in the UN or some diplomatic post somewhere or something like that, But Farage says, no, we're going to leave, and they mock him, they laugh at him, they disparage him, as they like to do. And 20 years later, he makes his valedictory speech, which was a victory speech ultimately, which they're out. And how do the bureaucrats kick and squeal in Brussels? And the British bureaucrats, because they're all in it together. They're all talking to each other. That's how it works. And then they had to go back to the people again. They had to have, 2 more elections. They could not pass it. Even though referendum. Remember that? Oh, the referendum. You can't go against a referendum. Gay marriage referendum. Oh my God, no way. But this referendum, that's not the same. All animals are equal, except some animals are more equal than other animals. But we can't tolerate that. No more. We can't tolerate that because where's it going to lead? We've seen where it's led. We've seen where it's led with Corona. These people aren't going away. They're still there. They still exist. The danger is ever present. And what's going to come next? So, and I don't imagine that we're going to be anointing, Craig Kelly as the Prime Minister after the 21st of May. Hopefully I'm wrong. But, as I say, there's 7 people that we can take heart from at the moment out of 227. Imagine if there's 14 or 20. Imagine if there's a couple of Victorians, for God's sake. That this state gets out of its malaise and gets back to some sort of truth and honesty, because it seems to me too, the forces of globalism are vulnerable. Does anyone know that in the book of Daniel? where, you know, and the clay feet, you know, the monster with clay feet, because its feet, it's too big. Its feet are made of clay and straw because it's going to topple over, because it actually is beyond the realms of what is realistic. You know, who doesn't want to be tall? I know almost every man I know wants to be a certain height, but does anyone want to be 9 foot? No, because what pressure does that put on your organs? How old does a 9 foot man actually live to? Because it's too big, it's too uncoordinated. Yeah, and I believe that's the same thing with globalism. So that's our strength. The strength is the nation state. It seems to be the perfect size. It's like a marriage seems to work between two people. I don't know that, you know, I mean, I know there's other cultures, but I'm not in that culture. I don't understand that. Do you know what I mean? A mother and father. And these are all the things, all the institutions that are under attack through cultural Marxism. They are the institutions, private property, and of course an expression of religion too. And what have they given us instead of religion? Materialism. And that's why no one has an ability to fight back, because no one has something to come back to within themselves and say, hang on, what am I really alive for? Yeah, I've got a mortgage, I've got to pay that, and I want to get a holiday home, and I bought a really nice Jag. I need to pay that off, or whatever, even something smaller. Doesn't, you know, I couldn't think of a better car than that. I should have. I'm tired, I'm wearing it, you know what I mean? But do you know what I'm like? And that's it. That's the material truth of our lives now. That's the sum of what we are. And so I could be grateful in some respects for Corona, because it's actually made me ask some really hard questions of myself. And it's made me say, because who really, in 2019, was I going to be doing this? Someone said to me, this is what you'll be doing. I said, give it a break. You know what I mean? I'll get another show, I'll get another job on another show somewhere or whatever. You know what I mean? I'll hang out for a bit. I was doing some stand-up comedy for a while, you know. And now here I am thinking, okay, well, why shouldn't I run for Parliament? We've complained, we won't be heard. No one hears us. Like I say, the Chief Commissioner of the AFP just lies. He just tells a lie and it becomes the truth. The lie becomes the truth, and it's that thing in Solzhenitsyn. They're lying, they know, we know they're lying, they know that we know that they know they're lying, but still they lie anyway. And a kid got arrested that night. After we had the protest movement in Canberra, a kid got arrested for camping in a camping ground without a permit. Now, the kid says he had a permit. The permit was $10. The AFP, who arrested him, the Australian Federal Police, arrested this kid for camping without a permit, even though he says he had one, and locked him up. Locked him up for him to be processed to see a magistrate the next day. So we went down there, and we had a chat with the police in there. Made no difference, of course. And I said to the guy, I said, mate, what are you going to do? What are you doing? You're standing against the people. I was buoyed. I felt so emboldened by the movement that had happened that day. And I said, we're going to come here, mate. We'll come for you next, because we're the people and we want the country back. We want to take our country back. And he just said no. There was 7,000 people there. Did the police commissioner tell him to say that? No, he didn't. He would have travelled. That's now the line you have to pull if you want to stay inside this organisation. And that's ultimately what he wants to do more than anything, is stay inside that organisation. So manipulate and adjust to rather than actually speak the truth. And I got my phone out and said, have a look, mate. You know, from the back of the old parliament to the new parliament, just a sea of people. And he still said, yeah, maybe 10,000, and walked away, because that's the best he could do. And the kid faces the magistrate the next day. He faces the magistrate the next day. And I couldn't believe it. Like when I was growing up in the 80s, the thought of being arrested for camping, I don't know, what? Someone had to tell me that. What are you talking about? Whatever. You know, and I went all the time. We went away camping all the time. It was great. We'd pull up by a riverbank and camp. And suddenly now that's an indictable offence. It's an indictable offence in modern Australia. And now there's this, agricultural act that Andrews is trying to get through. People are really concerned about bringing people off of the land, taking people off the land. So what the corporations will continue to provide for us, and that's what it feels like to me. We're in a corporate takeover. The corporations are so deep and so thick in all our lives, and they're just taking over. And where are we left in that globalism? There's no rights. We have absolutely no rights whatsoever. None. We'll just run over the top of it, and no one will even say anything, except for us. Except for us. And that's what I just don't want to live in that world. I don't want to live in that world. And again, it feels too big to me. And there is a constitution. Go and check it out. Go down to your local parliamentarian and grab your constitution. And apparently this is not even a grade. This is an annotated version of it. But we need to fight back with an argument for freedom.
because there's no one willing to make an argument for freedom at the moment. And I reckon they're all scared. They're all scared. They're full of fear. But that's not going to get us anywhere. We have to overcome that fear and become a movement, and a movement of people that are going to resist and going to push back.
Spoken by D. Richardson, authorised by D. Richardson, Melbourne.